Oh, Jeff, it's great to have you on the podcast on Stemiverse. How are you today?
Good morning or good afternoon.
Could
Thank
be
you so
for
much
us.
for having me. I'm very happy to be invited, and I'm very excited for this interview. Yes, I'm very good. Thank you.
I've got to ask, where are you? Because it looks like are you on a spaceship right now? I can see stars. There's like a big pipe on your left side as I can see you on the screen. What's happening?
It sometimes feels like we are on a spaceship. It's true. I don't want to lie to you. I'm not in the Large Hadron Collider at the moment. I'm in one of CERN's coolest conference rooms. And we have a very nice backdrop where you can kind of see how it looks like underground. It's a real picture. Yeah. The stars are not there, but it should give you some idea. It's exactly 100 meters below my feet at the moment. Yes, I'm almost on top of the sea.
So you are at CERN, the European Research Facility for Particle Research.
Yes.
And you've got this, perhaps one of humanity's most complex research machines, right? It's nothing simple. And I think as far as the scale is concerned and the complexity to put this thing together, it's probably up there among the most complex things that humans have built. So what happens there?
Well, I mean, as you said, CERN is really the originally it was the European Laboratory for Nuclear Physics. By now, we use our name and we don't call it European, we call it everywhere. It's really the world's largest facility for high energy physics, particle physics. And it's really true. I mean, the Large Hadron Collider is most likely the most complex machine ever built for research purpose, at least. It's what we are most famous for, but it's not the only thing that we are famous at CERN. There is a lot of stuff going on, but of course our prime focus is particle physics, it's high energy physics, and we are really mainly conducting fundamental research, meaning that we are really on the forefront of human knowledge. And so, it's
I've got to say
it's a fantastic place.
It's like CERN has changed humanity in many ways, and one of those ways is the invention of the web, which happened perhaps in your building, like Tim Berners-Lee. Where was he?
It was very close to us. It's absolutely true. I mean, my previous office was like 20 meters away from the office where Tim Berners-Lee really had the idea for the web. Because at the beginning, it was not even intended to be a World Wide Web. It was really just the simple question 30 years ago: how do I share data from one cube? It was not even a real computer to the other one. That was the main idea. That's where it all started, and it was almost to the day 30 years ago. We are currently in our celebration of the Web 30, so to speak. Yeah. And
like 30 years later, we've got Facebook and Twitter.
And we got a chance to do this interview. I mean, otherwise... Exactly.
And my kids are now leaving me alone because they're watching Netflix, something ridiculous. I'm just joking, but it's just, you never know where this research will go. And knowledge is such a fluid thing that you just don't know where it's going to take you. And we're going to get all that, because today we are talking about not about particle physics really, although that's an amazing topic, maybe one day, but we're talking about the education that CERN as an institution is offering to teachers from around the world who can spend a bit of time at CERN, learn about a lot of amazing things that we are going to talk about, and then bring that knowledge and the experience back to the students.
Exactly, yes.
But before that, I really have to say about it. It feels mind-boggling to me, the fact that the thing that you've got at least in the image behind you, is perhaps one of the biggest machines built ever. But its purpose is to learn about the tiniest scale matter and energy. Like, you need something so big to go down to the really, really tiny level. And it's just, it's hard to comprehend.
I mean, that's true for me. I've been at CERN now for more than 8 years, and it's still mind-blowing, I have to confess. But it's not just this huge machine, which is the accelerator, which we use to accelerate particles with. It's also our particle detectors, because after all, if you want to investigate something, what we usually do is we smash the particles together. And then, of course, we are talking about the the smallest, we don't even know what it is, to be honest. We don't know really what a particle is, but we know it's tiny, yet our machines to detect them, the particle detectors, they are huge. They are cathedrals of science, if you want. They're 46 meters long, 26 meters high, weigh 7,000 tons. It's crazy. I mean, for something really tiny. So yeah,
man, that takes us like from one thing to the other. So you've got the sensors, like we'll call them sensors. It's the detectors that you talk about, which got huge magnets. Like you need the power of a city to fit them to be able to detect what happens when particles collide. But then you've got the computer science component of that, because you can't read the results in real time. You've got to scan them, store the data, then just that amount of volume that the detectors, volume of data the detectors produce has to be stored in some kind of medium. There's new research there to figure that out, and come up with research techniques and analysis techniques that don't exist yet.
I mean, you're absolutely right, but there's one more component, even because we would love to store all the data that we create, but it's impossible because we are talking about roughly, let's say, 1 billion collisions in all the big experiments together per second. 1 billion collisions per second. There is no way we can store all of it. And to be honest, we don't want to store all of that because not all of it is, is interesting for us. So our detectors, that's not done by humans, but our detectors in splits of split seconds have to decide which data, what do we keep, what do we throw away. And we throw away almost everything, and we only keep like a tiny fraction. But of course, if you do it a long time, you get a lot of data out of it. But I mean, that's where a lot of innovation goes in. I mean, how can we make our algorithms faster? How can we detect the cool stuff out of the vast majority? That's the real tricky part.
Let's see if we can get back to this. I want to talk about the work that you do with teachers now. So you are the manager of the Teachers program at CERN. So CERN has got a program that involves teachers from all around the world. There's member states and perhaps non-member states. We'll get into it. Why do teachers need to be involved in all this? Like this is like postgraduate stuff in clinical physics, PhDs. Now, a teacher goes to a class to teach, I don't know, year 5, 6, 7, like a basic Newtonian physics. Why do they need to be involved with all this?
That's a very nice question. Thank you. Well, let me maybe first just start that or state CERN has several main missions. And of course, I mean, one of the main missions is fundamental research, but one of the other main missions is education. There is no way in the world we can run a lab like this without training the scientists of tomorrow. So we really put a lot of effort in. I myself, I was very fortunate to do my PhD at CERN. So I was one of the lucky ones to be educated at CERN. And you need that. You need people to then learn what's going on at CERN to eventually take over. So that's one of the main components. But of course, for that, we need university students who are already interested in physics, engineering, IT. But unfortunately, the vast majority of people are not necessarily automatically drawn towards science. Let's put it this way, and that's perfectly fine. Not everyone has to be or should be a scientist. That would be a strange world to live in. But we do need informed people. We need. Well, then again, maybe. So we do need, informed people, and we need those who are interested to have a chance to make it into science, and those who then want to go into politics or arts, they should at least have an understanding of scientific understanding. I mean, I'm hoping. So. Of course, we have to start earlier. So there is a big motivation for us to start not just at university level. We want to go further. Now, we would love to talk to high school students or even primary school kids directly from the beginning. But there are just way too many of them. I mean, there are a lot of teachers out there, but the number is slightly smaller. So CERN now for more than 20 years has invested a lot of effort and money into educating and training high school teachers. So we're really talking about, we are aiming at high school teachers who teach, let's say, students of the age between 15 and 18. Sometimes high school is also defined in some countries from, let's say, age 12 to 18. So that's where we are, middle to high school. And as you said, I mean, of course, there is a lot of in the curriculum which is Newtonian physics and maybe what we sometimes call classical physics. In some countries in the world, you have modern physics in the curriculum, but modern is then usually Einstein, 1905, so more than 100 years ago. It's not necessarily that modern. I mean, still better than not anything, so I'm not complaining about that. But we do see it. There is a lot of need to educate teachers in what's going on at the moment. I'm not saying that they don't know what's going on in particle physics. Most of them studied it at university, but there is so much advancement and so much new stuff to know. So that our motivation is we want to bring teachers to CERN directly. Have our scientists, experts in the field, tell them what's going on right now. I'm literally meaning that there are people who work on a Nobel Prize winning machine, then take 2 hours of the time, come to my teachers, give a talk, and then go back to hopefully get a Nobel Prize at some point. So that's the level of excitement that we have. And of course, why do we bring people to CERN, or why do teachers want to travel to Geneva is we then can show them our beautiful lab. I mean, we want to show them where science is taking place at the moment, which is a nice experience for them. But of course, it's a first-hand experience that they can then transfer to their students. So that's the main motivation behind our teacher programs, and one of the many reasons why I consider myself very lucky to have this job, to be honest.
So, I detected there's a few reasons. There's a few things that happen in the teachers program. Obviously, you've got the cutting edge knowledge that is transmitted, provided to the teachers that come over a relatively long way for a lot of them to Geneva. The experience of being there where these discoveries are being made is also significant, right? Because
absolutely.
I guess like you look like a very excited person being there and doing what you're doing. I guess that's what teachers will see when they come to you or to your colleagues and spend a bit of time with you. They see all this excitement about all the discovery that is taking place in your normal day in the office. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
a few more trillion particle collisions later. So we discovered something today, and that comes across as well. And then knowing, what the differences are between, or actually I should say, the state of physics and the state of science between what they studied in university perhaps 20 years ago, perhaps even 5 years ago, versus now. Even that is mind-boggling in terms of like how much can happen with an instrument like that, or with the efforts of scientists around the world. So all that put together make that experience, I guess, a lifetime experience for a lot of teachers. So what happens after that? And I'm just fast forwarding a little bit now, but I'd like to come back to what happens while they're still there, but let's fast forward and see what the end result is. So those teachers eventually go back to their classrooms around the world again. So what normally happens once they get back?
I mean, speaking from experience, first, we like to call our teachers, once they completed the teacher program, alumni of our programs, and as such, ambassadors of CERN, of science, which, I mean, they are science teachers. They are already ambassadors, but now they really have this concrete case for CERN, and they go to their classroom, and the feedback is just fantastic. The students get in touch with CERN, or at least they are aware of CERN, not necessarily CERN. I mean, of course, as you say, the teachers come from all around the world. So it's not just CERN. Of course, we are a prime example, but it's more than that. It's fundamental research that sometimes it's not easy to grasp the idea why we should even invest both person power and money into advancing fundamental knowledge. But it's a case that teachers can make. So that's one of the main things. And we do see it. A lot of the teachers come back to CERN with their students. They really? Are so fascinated, and they travel because CERN really runs a fantastic visits program. So we have a fantastic visit service. We have probably more than 120,000 visitors every year traveling to Geneva, visiting CERN. And the majority, I think more than half by now, are teachers with their students. So this is really something where they are so fascinated. They bring their students along, show them what they've experienced. And I mean, they are multipliers. I mean, if they like something, they will share the enthusiasm with the students. And as I said earlier, we are not aiming for all of their students. That would be crazy. But if some of them appreciate the scientific value, I think we already did a fantastic job. Yeah, and so of course, I mean that's the cool thing. If you have thousands of teachers at hand, and if they are motivated, something is happening, and that's cool.
I think as you said, not everybody has to become a scientist or an engineer or a mathematician, or there's plenty of other things that make life interesting, right? But I'm thinking that the experience and deep understanding of science and the scientific method, in my opinion, experience, it can really transform life. Like it can make you a thinking person, like a useful person, a problem-solving person, dependable, and so many other things. It's that scientific way of thinking. So do you think that a CERN experience can also give the students and the teachers a little bit of that, like the way of thinking?
Per se, yes, but I would. I don't want to oversell such an experience. Of course, it's not like oh, now I understand the scientific method. But clearly, if you're appreciative of what's happening in fundamental research, you need a deeper understanding of the scientific method, and that's clearly something. What I like the most when the high school students come to CERN is that they start to see, first of all, that science is not necessarily looking as it is portrayed in any stereotype that you have. Of course, we have people who look like Einstein. Of course, we have people with crazy hair. But this is a fraction. There are so many, especially young people in science. I mean, the majority at CERN, the majority of people working at CERN are between the age of 27 and 35. These are all the PhD students and postdocs. And that's what I care the most, that they see a diverse range of both women and men, of course, but also from around the world. This is it's also one of the coolest things why I enjoy working at CERN so much. It's a highly diverse workplace, and as you said earlier, a standard day in the office could be that you go for lunch and you sit next to a Nobel Prize winner or a very important person who also advanced our field. It should not always be the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of people, for one Nobel Prize winner, it's like the tip of the iceberg, right? There's a lot of people around, support networks, like, Nobel Prize winners typically build on the shoulders of other giants or scientists in general. Team effort, it's another thing that I like about science. It's not a solo effort, although it's very hard to say that individual effort in any field of human life and achievement is true. It's pretty much never the case in anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, here at CERN, it's so evident. I mean, this beautiful machine behind me, it was built over decades by thousands of people, and I'm really saying thousands of people, and all of them work together, and none of them get any, oh, that was my success. It's a shared experience, and now hundreds, if not thousands of people are operating this machine and running it. So it's really, I mean, as you say, science by now, there is no one scientist alone anymore. It's a group effort, absolutely.
Yeah, humanity, awesome. Let's come back. What I'm saying is, like, this is what is possible, right? This is what is possible if we can come up with a common goal and objective and then commit to it. So I love it. Apollo program.
Yeah.
CERN. All right. Moving forwards, is there an ideal, like, actually I shouldn't say ideal, but who is the Teachers program really for? Is it for any teacher, particular kinds of teacher, particular kinds of teacher from particular places?
Yeah.
Who's eligible?
That's another very good question. So CERN offers two different kinds of teacher programs. We have the national teacher programs, where we bring together a group of teachers from usually one country, or let's say one language group. So for example, we also have a Spanish language teacher program where teachers who speak Spanish come together for roughly 1 week. So those national teacher programs, these are 1 week programs. And then in addition, we also have the international teacher programs, where we bring together a group of up to 48 teachers from all around the world, and they then stay at CERN for 2 weeks. So it's a more advanced, or at least a more advanced experience in that sense. And so if we distinguish between those two formats, the national teacher programs, they are predominantly for teachers from member states and associate member states. So at CERN we have about 30, oh yeah, there we are, very good.
I'll show that.
Yeah, I think that makes way more sense, exactly. So the national teacher programs, I think even if you click on it, because then on the right hand side you will see the menu of all our member states. So these are the member states of CERN. Then we have further down we have the associate member states, and then we have some non-member states where we already started doing selected national teacher programs. But as you can see, this is not covering all the countries in the world, because at some point we first have to focus on CERN's member and associate member states. And that's why I'm so happy that we also have the international teacher programs, where we have 2 in summer, where, as I said, we bring together a diverse group of high school teachers from all around the world. Usually we have 48 teachers from about 35 different nationalities, and they spend 2 weeks in summer, either in July or in August at CERN. And I love all our programs, obviously, and all of them have their purpose. But of course, they are quite different in that sense that if you bring together a group from one country, you talk about your home curriculum, you talk about your experience, and that's absolutely relevant. However, if you bring together 48 teachers from all around the world, the program per se is already important, but it's also, if not probably even more important, the experience the teachers make while being at CERN, because these are really, I would say, lifelong friendships that are started at CERN. And these are not just friendships where people then meet each other in a couple of years down the road, but they also start working together. So we really have perfectly fine examples of teachers from different countries bringing together their students, either via the wonders of the World Wide Web or even by traveling to and visiting each other's places. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very happy. We have one program every week, which gives you a little bit of an idea of our workload. So we really try to bring as many teachers to CERN as possible. We are talking about roughly 1,000 high school teachers per year. And oh yeah, when I say high school teachers, so we say in service, that's really important for us. So people who are really actively teaching, and we call it science teachers, because after all, in some countries, teachers do not teach only physics, they teach science. In some countries, they only teach physics. So we are very inclusive in that sense. As long as it's relevant to your daily practice, you are considered a strong candidate for us.
Right.
Yeah.
So you do need to have a bit of physics background, or at least general science.
Exactly. Yes.
So because you talk about in your program contains concepts that you need to, that are of course physics, and to be able to follow the program, you need to have some familiarity with those concepts.
And also we want to make sure that what the teachers gain from the program can then be used in their classroom. So if they are not necessarily teaching this kind of subjects in their classroom, they can still try to, sneak it in. But of course, it's way more meaningful if someone has to teach this in the classroom and wants to know what's going on. What can I tell my students at the moment?
Yeah. So there's some kind of selection process where the teacher will put an application in. And
I mean, especially for teachers from Australia, but for teachers from all around the world, for the international teacher programs, it is true we have a very strict application process. It's good for us. There's a lot of interest from around the world, but it means that we receive, unfortunately for the teachers, we receive way more applications than we have slots available. So the application process is quite strict in that sense that teachers have to put some effort in it, meaning you have to fill out some questions. There are some mean questions questions which I came up with. I can share them with you from last year's application process, because we don't use them anymore, of course. So last year we asked, looking at the standard model of particle physics, which one is your most favorite particle and why? Which is a very mean question, I admit that, but it gives us an idea of how relevant this program might be for a teacher, because if you are able to answer that, or if at least if you are able to make up your mind about it, no one needs to know what their favorite particle is. It gives us an idea of what we do. So it's true, our application process is quite strict. But the good news are, for the international programs, if you submit a very good application, and if the selection committee then rates you or top ranks you and you are selected, you get a financial allowance that covers all your expenses while being at CERN. So CERN, I'm really most grateful. CERN puts a lot of money in that. So I have this very awesome position. I can really bring teachers together, and this includes teachers from countries where you could usually not even think about traveling to Geneva, because let's face it, it is really expensive, and I'm not happy with that. So I'm very, very grateful that CERN really provides me with this budget, so I can bring teachers from all around the world. We usually cover teachers from every continent, I'm really excited about our progress, I have to admit.
That comes out really clearly. But that's great, because like Geneva and Switzerland in general is a very expensive place, but that's not an issue because those expenses are covered. So yes, the teacher would just need to buy a ticket, I guess. If they're coming from Australia, just fly over to Geneva, and then 2 weeks program and expenses are all covered.
Yes.
So is the application process for people that come from member states versus non-member states is the same?
It's exactly the same. So for the international programs, there's only one web form, let's say per program, because there are 2 programs. So we have 2 web forms, but they are almost identical. However, not quite identical, because otherwise teachers would use the same answers for the same questions. So we are very mean, I have to admit. So we have different questions which sound very similar, but they're not similar. So, I mean, they're not equal. And so, but there is no distinction between where teachers come from. Every teacher who wants to take part has to submit the same application, which also includes a 1-minute video, so that we also get a better idea of who you are, what you're interested in. And it is a chance for teachers to convince us that they are the ideal candidate for our programs. So,
yeah, it's competitive. And I think like you've got to be serious. It is a commitment you put in resources.
Exactly.
The teacher will need to put in resources. So you have to select. You got to be careful. I wonder what, like, you said earlier, like the program has been running for about 30 years, right? It's not something that just happened. 20 years?
Yeah.
20 years. So in that time, are there examples of students that after the experience that they had, either with their teacher coming back from the teachers program at CERN and talking about it, or themselves actually visiting with a teacher. So is there an example of a student that became eventually a physicist, a scientist, and now perhaps is working there at CERN or some other part of the world doing fundamental particles research?
It's exactly like this. We have so many stories like that. Whatever you want, you name it. We have students who were taught by teachers who came to CERN first, went home, and then taught their students very well. And then the students decided, well, this is now my aim. I want to work at CERN at some point. And 6-7 years later, they were here as either a PhD student or a postdoc already. So we have that story. We also have the other story that one thing I was very impressed with. A teacher came to our program and learned a lot about medical applications, because while we were talking a lot about the World Wide Web, there are so many other spin-offs and technology transfer examples. And I think the most prominent one are medical applications. I mean, nowadays we use accelerated proton or hadron or ion beams to treat certain cancer cells. But we also use particle detectors like our detectors at CERN in hospitals. So this is really one thing where we never thought about it, but it's something where fundamental research just leads to. And so our teacher, this one teacher, she learned about it and she went home, and then she had one student who was really debating whether she wants to study medicine or physics. It was both in her interest. And when she then learned about medical applications, she decided, okay, I will study physics because there's still a chance for me to go into medicine. And she is now an accelerator beam. I think she's a beam scientist at the moment in one of the largest treatment centers in Europe, which was only opened recently. So, I mean, this is something where you can really pinpoint, if the teacher would not have told her, this student, she would have never, she would probably still have gone into medicine. So it's not, not a lost soul, but it just gives a larger perspective to students what they can do. It's sometimes you don't really know what will my life be if I study, let's say, physics.
Exactly.
Will it be me in front of a blackboard and breathing in the dust of the chalk? But there is so much more. I mean, it's, yeah.
I think that's a great example because it also shows what is possible to do when you combine two areas of science, so pretty much like every other part of life, that traditionally are not really aligned. So in Newton's time, he would think about gravity, and a physician, right? A physician would think about how to treat a wound, and they've got nothing to talk about. And then you fast forward 200 years, and a particle physicist now is using the exact same knowledge about detecting new types of particles to treat cancer. And so that example just exemplifies that this is possible. And in modern science in general, this tends to be a very frequent occurrence. So more experience is actually needed in order to generate those cross-fertilizations between branches of science.
Yeah, I fully agree.
And the web.
The web, of course. And what some people don't know is that the touch screen of our phones or all modern touch screens were invented at CERN. And really? It was not in any way so we can now look at cat pictures, which is nice now. But back then it was in the 70s, we built a large control room for one of our accelerators. And one of the technicians said, oh, there are a lot of buttons. I don't like this. And he had a very good supervisor, because when he said, look, I'm thinking of, designing a touch kind of thing. No one knew what it was. The supervisor didn't say, are you crazy? Let's just, install the buttons. That's your job. The supervisor said, sounds interesting, but you will have to invent it. And the guy was like, oh, yeah. And the supervisor, as always, said, you have 4 more months. And after 4 more months, he had the first prototype. I have to admit, the capacitive touchscreens, the idea or the technology was already out there, but it was really the first working example was installed at CERN. And the reason why it's now in every major device and everyone uses them like on a daily basis is CERN, whatever we do, we make it open access. CERN is really, this is a strong policy at CERN, and whatever we do for society. So we make everything available. If people are bored, I hope not during our interview, but maybe at some point people might be bored, they can go to our website, cern.ch, or just home.cern, because we have a high-level domain now. And there is the CDS, it's the CERN document server, where people can download whatever they want. If someone wants to build their own Large Hadron Collider, the blueprint for this machine is online. So, yeah.
Well, since you mentioned that. Oh, look at this control room.
Exactly, yes.
So you go to CERN, so then there is...
For example, resources. And on resources, you find everything. You can either by topic or by format or by audience. And the moment you click on anything, it will lead you in a deep network of millions of different resources. And these range from research papers to videos to animations to whatever you want. There is just so much out there.
This is why Tim Berners-Lee invented the web, right, at CERN, because CERN had so much to share with the world that this was really the only way to do it. You can't print this on books or magazines and share. It has to be on an electronic worldwide medium.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
This is amazing. So you've got augmented reality here. I'm not going to attempt to click on this because it's probably going to want me to download something to play the augmented reality. But you've
Most
got,
likely, yeah.
You've got artists there, microscopic
yeah.
black hole. Because we were talking about that before we started recording, and about like whether there has been a black hole created artificially in CERN.
That's a very delicate discussion. So we have to be very careful here. Careful in that sense that it's difficult to tell people, yes, we do want to see microscopic black holes. That is true. But of course, the moment people hear black holes, they have the notion in their head that, oh, so CERN wants to, create something that will suck up the world. Or, I mean, that is absolutely not true. And exactly. And we are so, but of course, if we were to see something like this, it would hint us into a completely new branch of physics. I mean, if we were to see microscopic black holes, which I believe, or I'm afraid it's very unlikely, but if we were to see that, we would not even see the black hole itself. It would not be stable for any reasonable time amount for us. It's like 10 to the minus, I think, 20 something seconds. So, but we would see the leftover parts of it. So we would say, oh, there was something, and that would tell us, hey, there might be new dimensions, or more dimensions than what we know, for example.
Yeah, so, that's kind of research.
And what we are looking at the moment is, it's true, it's an artistic representation of what something like this could look like. So it's really that is actually very accurate to what we are creating on a daily basis, second per second, hundreds of millions of those collisions that you can see. This is visualization of it, of course. No one is looking at those pictures and takes out a ruler and say, oh, that's it's a red line. All our computers take care of that. But of course, we do want to visualize what it might look like, and we also visualize it to see if our detectors are performing well, because sometimes the detector, there are some sensors in it which are maybe not firing, and then we see it in this visualization rather than by looking at zeros and ones.
I'm just curious about.
We should really do this interview in one location, Australia.
I'll send you my questions.
But since we were talking about the artistic representation, CERN is really, another reason why I enjoy being here so much. We also have a huge Arts at CERN program where we have on a regular basis artists in residence who are, for example, doing representations of what's going on, but they are also getting in touch with the scientists at CERN and try to translate that into an artistic perspective, because that's another way of communicating our science. Because, we are talking about very abstract and very difficult things to grasp. So the arts, I think, is a fantastic opportunity to do more in this sense. And so CERN also puts a lot of effort there. And so, that's also something which I like a lot.
Yeah, in STEM education, we talk a lot about art and how art can bind very well with science and engineering, because they're both human endeavors. And art is a lot about communication, and how do you communicate concepts like this, like you collide particles, and what happens? So you ask an artist, right?
Yeah,
and they come up with a visualization like this. So so I wanted to ask you. How real is this picture? I know it's an artistic representation, but it stems from something real, right? So in my mind, there's a collision happening right here in the middle. Two particles. Is it like two electrons that just smashed?
At the moment, we are colliding protons with protons mainly. From time to time, we also collide even larger objects like lead ions. But this most likely was a proton-proton collision, where it's absolutely true. This is, I would say, a very realistic representation of how we can imagine what's going on. It's a slice through one of our large detectors. You can see in the lower bottom down on the right, you see Atlas experiment. Yeah. The Atlas is really the largest particle detector at CERN. As I said, about 46 meters long, 26 meters high. And in the center of this detector, which is every particle detector at CERN and in high energy physics is kind of shaped like an onion. So you have different layers from the very inside all the way to the outside. And if you then collide particles in the center of it and you have collisions, what happens in these collisions is that hundreds, if not thousands of new particles are created. So it's not that we break up anything, it's really through the transformation of the collision energy, hundreds of new particles are created. And this is what is shown in this picture. So they fly in any given direction, and those that have an electric charge are then they are following, they interact with the magnetic field. So yeah, they interact also with the material, but we also have a strong magnetic field which is present in all the particle detector inner parts. And so they are then bent on trajectories depending on the electric charge, because we have this beautiful concept, depending on which country you're from, you either call it maybe Lorentz force, for example, or the right-hand rule. And so that works for particles with different electric charges in different directions. So those particles that are, let's say, negative go in the one direction, and those that are positively charged go in the other direction. And so this minor trick already allows us to distinguish everything that is, that's negative, that's positive. So that's one of the many analysis tricks we have. And you can see in this image, there are a lot of particles that only make it to this one circle, which is like that we are looking at. So they don't continue there anymore. So these are most likely, let's say, small particles such as electrons or positrons, exactly. So they then really, they are stopped in this one layer. But you can see there are more particles going more to the outside, and these are more high energetic particles, such as, let's say, protons and neutrons. But you can even have a muon going all the way through the detector, not depositing all of its energy throughout the way, and just continuing its way, and they are not even stopped in the detector. So that can happen as well.
I got to ask now, just to see how fast science is moving, and how these instruments contribute to this velocity. We are looking at perhaps, I don't know, dozens or maybe even hundreds of particles in this picture. It's not just one or two, right? It's not just a couple of neutrons.
These are definitely hundreds, yes. Yes.
How many of those did we know about, say, 20 or 30 years ago?
You're testing my historic knowledge. Oh my goodness. All right.
Approximately. I want to know how new is all this. Like Einstein, I don't think Einstein knew about all this, because it was exactly theoretically maybe, but there was no way to prove that.
No. I mean, I will not go into detail in definite years, but it's absolutely true. We have this saying of the zoo of particle physics, because in the 1960s and onwards, more and more particle physics was pursued, and we discovered new particles, or so we thought. Yeah. So we discovered really a lot of new particles, and we just gave them names, and we really sorted them. And at some point, it became a task like in biology. Oh, you find a new plant, you name it. And that's how it was.
Classification.
So classification, and we call it a zoo, and it's something that I'm not really a big fan of nowadays, because it is really anachronistic. It conveys the image that particle physics means hundreds of particles that everyone has to keep in their mind. Yeah. But gladly, in the 60s, different research teams proposed the idea, which was then later proven or turned out to be the precise model, that we have even smaller particles, which we call quarks. And those quarks, they can combine. You can either have one quark and an antiquark to make a meson, or you can have three quarks or three antiquarks to make either a hadron or an anti-hadron. And so you have
chemistry with the quarks, and you can like essentially have chemistry with those fundamental particles and make things.
Exactly. And so we have 6 quarks that we know of, and for now it really doesn't look like there are more. And they can combine in different, you have different permutations, and that of course leads to a lot of new composite particles. And in the beginning, we only found those composite particles, and we just named them. But then, as our experiments progressed, we found, oh no, there are smaller particles, which at the moment we really call elementary particles. So this is really, for now, we don't see any inner structure. In physics, you should never say no, but it really doesn't look very promising at the moment that there is another stage down. And so those quarks, these 6 quarks plus their anti-quarks, so we have 12 quarks, these are the fundamental building blocks together with the electrons and It's antiparticle, the anti-electron, the positron. And so with quarks, and out of the 6 quarks, you only need 2. You need the up and the down quark, because with those you can make a proton and a neutron. And with an electron, that's all. That's all the matter that we are made of. Is essentially 1 up quark, 1 down quark, and an electron, because with the quarks you can make protons and neutrons. With that you can combine them to make atoms. They can combine to make molecules, and that's how we describe matter. I mean, this is the best model we have at hand for now. And so the idea that there are hundreds of particles that even, I mean, you know, students have to memorize the names, absolutely not. There are only a very, very small number of small particles that make up everything, and the names are really not important. So if anyone is, you know, worried that you have to memorize what is what, no, that's something you look up. You don't need to.
That's what the web is for, right?
That's what the web is for, exactly. Yes, yes. Or books. Books are also okay.
You mean paper books? So I'm just thinking, like, the kind of things that can really change society and what society think of itself, and of course what humans think about themselves. And I think of a couple of things. Like, one might be finding intelligent life in the universe. We can start with bacteria on Mars, but then intelligent life. But the second, that's quite hard, right? But the second, which is also hard, but perhaps you just need a large hadron collider, is those fundamental particles, and just get to the bottom of this structure that makes up everything and understand what is down there, because from there you can start building up everything, and then you've got an understanding of not just what's happening on Earth, but anywhere in the universe. Multiple dimensions perhaps can come out of that, but that's just the fundamental knowledge.
You're absolutely right. I would not necessarily say that we are looking for even smaller particles, because, or let's put it this way, the model that we have for now, we call it the standard model of particle physics, is a beautiful theory. It's just beautiful, and we hate it because it only explains about 5% of what we see in the universe. It explains all the matter. I mean, it's very relevant to our life. It explains us. We can use it to explain what we are made of. But we know by looking at the universe that only about 5% of what we see out there is really made of the stuff that we are made of. There is about 25% that we call dark matter, where the only thing we know is there is something that behaves like matter, meaning it behaves gravitational, but it doesn't interact electromagnetically. So it's dark. That's our best guess at the moment. We call it dark. We don't know what it is. Our assumption is that this dark matter is made of particles, because in science, you always start with what you have, and you try to apply it to new observations that don't fit your theory. So of course, we are very successful explaining everything with a small set of particles. So we are now trying to find particles that would make up dark matter. But it doesn't mean that there have to be those particles. There could be something different that we don't even know about. There could be a different behavior of gravity. After all, we don't really fully understand gravity in terms of quantum field theory. So there is still some room for Nobel Prizes. We don't want to have all the Nobel Prizes ourselves. If students or teachers are keen to do that, be our guest.
And that's why we need new physicists, right? That you're helping to train and get on board.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, if we now add up, we have 5% matter, we have 25% dark matter, where we at least have some ideas. That leaves us with 70%, what we call dark energy. Sorry?
I have an idea about what that might be. Just
call
don't tell anyone.
Call us. We would need any help.
I was having this conversation with Leo, who is 11, my first son. He's 11 years old. He kind of believes that we are living in a simulation, and those dark matter regions of the universe are just like in Minecraft, the computer only generates part of the world in which you are, because it's how much memory it has, and that's blocks. So
okay.
Maybe that's just not generated by the simulator. Maybe.
Could you please send my best wishes to your son and encourage him to write down his ideas on a paper, send them to us. We really, at this stage, we take everything, and because we really don't know, especially with the remaining 70% we call dark energy, we have a name for it, because we see the universe is expanding, but we don't even, we have theories, but we don't even know where to start with it. So it is really true. The standard model of particle physics is beautiful, but we already know it's not the last step. So maybe coming back to the original question, it is true, if we want to advance our knowledge in that sense, we need to further our knowledge. We need to do more physics. There's a huge debate going on at the moment where we should go. Of course, the history of CERN or any high energy physics lab shows us that you always go larger and larger, because it's very simple. If you want to reach, or if you want to discover new particles, until now, you had to build larger machines, because with larger circumference comes along larger energy, and with energy of the acceleration, and with that you have a higher probability of detecting new and even more heavier particles. So of course, at the moment, CERN is investigating new options, and there are different projects which are at the moment in the feasibility study stage. So we concluded feasibility studies to either let's go for a very large linear accelerator or a very large circular accelerator. And here we are talking about roughly 100 kilometers of circumference. Don't get me wrong, I'm absolutely in favor of that, because after all, the return in investment in that, even if the worst case scenario is that we build a larger machine, which of course is supported by the physics so far, so that we say, okay, there could be something new. And even if we, after probably 100 years of running the machine, or let's say 60 years of running the machine, we don't find anything new, which I even think is unlikely. But I mean, all the things that come along with it, starting with jobs, starting with training the scientists and advancing our knowledge and the technology. I mean, no one knows what will be the new thing in our lives, but for sure, 30 years ago, no one thought that through the internet, the world would become such a connected place. I mean, this is really the revolution of our times. And I'm very happy it started at CERN, because that still enables us to have a free connection and a free access to the internet. I mean, that's a discussion we will have at some point. I'm very happy for now. The consortium, and especially Tim Berners-Lee, is a very strong advocate of having it free, and that's, in my opinion, how it should be. So I'm very happy CERN has this open access policy that the web is free.
It's true. Like, it's kind of a different topic to our core discussion, but imagine if the web had been invented, I don't know, in Apple's labs or in Microsoft labs or whatever. It wouldn't be what it is today, right? We'd be living in a totally different society. Perhaps information would be a lot less, accessible without some kind of ticket membership.
I think that's absolutely likely. Yes.
Yeah.
So
great. That's where taxpayers, millions and billions actually go, and it really makes a big difference, not just in the state members, member states, but globally. It's just it's a revolution, as you said.
Yeah, and it's not that expensive, actually. I mean, I'm not fully aware of your bank account. It's definitely a lot of money for me. The moment you talk about billions, of course, that's a lot of money, but it's really, really not a lot of money in terms of a country or many states.
Just to understand the scale, like, and everybody. Pretty much people are familiar with their own countries, for example, military expenditure or education sector expenditure or welfare. Like, what is the budget for CERN around, like, to do all this work with the teachers, to fulfill its mission every year? What kind of budget are we looking at?
It's very simple. The annual budget of CERN that is given to us from the member states and the associate member states is roughly 1.1 billion Swiss francs. So it's 1,000 million Swiss francs. That's roughly 1 billion euros. I'm hoping you can now convert that into Australian dollars.
I'm using the web.
There we go.
Let's see. So that's, I'm just putting in 1 billion Swiss francs to AUD.
Yeah.
That's seriously, this is This is just 1.3 billion Australian dollars, which is really, it's like 1/4 of the profit of one of our big banks, like the profit, like which goes.
Exactly.
Like nothing.
It's my prime example that was so mind-blowing to me. So I graduated at the University of Vienna in Austria. It is by far the largest university of the country, but it's not the only one. And the annual budget of the University of Vienna is roughly the same annual budget as CERN. We are talking about roughly 1 billion euros a year. That's what the university costs. And so, of course, this is money. It's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have, but I don't think I would love to have this kind of money. But for a country, and especially now if we talk about CERN, this money is provided by member states, by 22 member states and the associate member states. So everyone only has a small share. And if you divide, and of course this is a cheap trick, but if you divide it per inhabitant of all member states, we are talking about roughly 500 million people living in all the countries. So every one of us pays about 2 francs per year. For CERN. And of course, this is a cheap trick because dividing any number through 500 million, but still, it's really not a lot of money. And so that's why, of course, I'm a big favor. I mean, I'm a big fan of spending and funding research and advancement in any field, but it's a discussion we have to have. I mean, after all, money is tight. Money is always the issue. So. Yeah, but it's something that I feel very deeply about, that it's not too much.
Yeah, the return on investment is just amazing.
Absolutely.
Like CERN has revolutionized the world at least once. With the discoveries in physics, those things take a lot longer than the web took to transform society. But if you think about energy, materials, space travel, I think those benefits are down the road until technology comes up with everything. And
hopefully using our knowledge and the scientific method also to tackle what I personally consider probably the most critical thing is climate change. After all, we need to, I mean, humankind, we have to do something. This is, there's no debate about it. And if, for example, CERN, we have the LHC computing grid, for example, we have a huge network that spans the whole globe where a lot of data centers just combine to share their computing power. And this can also be used to, for example, calculate very difficult climate models, for example, to at least predict what can happen. And so this is also being used. And of course, it's I would say a minor contribution, but it's definitely one of the most important of our times. Yeah.
Well, Jeff, I still have like a million questions about physics, or should I say a billion? Sorry. Carl Sagan just pops in mind when I think about the universe. Carl Sagan comes in mind. But because we just hit the hour mark, I'd like to ask you just a few closing questions. And
sure.
This one is like for the students and teachers that are listening to us and they want the CERN experience. What do they need to do? Obviously, you got the website. Is that where the research begins and the process?
For high school teachers, absolutely. High school teachers should just go to teachers.cern.ch and check out all the information that is on our teacher program website. Absolutely. For high school students or students in general who are interested, they should really go to cern.ch or home.cern. And there they can find information on not only how to visit CERN, because after all our visits are free, but you have to book it in advance so that you get a slot when you come here. But if they want to get in touch with CERN on a professional level, meaning that someone finishes high school and then goes to university and they study anything, and it really doesn't have to be physics, only a small amount of people at CERN are physicists. I think the majority are engineers or IT specialists, but we also have lawyers or doctors. I mean, so you study something, and then I think the best entryway for anyone who wants to work at CERN at some point, or to figure out if working at CERN is something for you, is the summer student program, which is really for university students. So in their, roughly speaking, 3rd year of university studies. And if they apply and if they are selected, they can come to CERN for up to 3 months in summer, fully paid, to Swiss standards so they can survive. That's very important. And they are here not in any way to, cook coffee or whatever. They are really working in concrete projects, and it's just amazing. And I think everyone who works at CERN, who is a holder of an indefinite contract, if you ask them, how did you come to CERN? I think about 90% of them will tell you, well, I was a summer student once, and then they just finished their studies. They came back as a master or PhD student, and then it just goes on for the lucky ones who make their long-lasting career at CERN. Yes. Yes, you're showing the Visit at CERN website at the moment.
Yeah, Visit CERN. But you can visit CERN as a tourist, essentially, to see the sites there. You've got a lot of places where civilians essentially can go.
Exactly. And even if you cannot book your tour, because they do book out quite fast, we have 2 permanent exhibitions at CERN, which are, again, free of cost, and you don't have to book in advance for that. You can just show up and visit our exhibitions, which also gives you a very nice idea of how the life at CERN looks like. Yes.
Yeah. I guess this is the complex here. We're looking at CERN.
You're looking at a small snapshot of our complex. CERN, the main site per se, is already large. We are talking about 2 kilometers in length, half a kilometer in width. So this is, a small snapshot of CERN. Yes.
We'll use the web to and plan the visit. All right. Now, just a couple of closing questions. I like books and I like to read, and I'm interested in particle physics. I like to learn about what is happening right now. I listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson a lot, and my kids are as well. What would you recommend for reading material, not necessarily CERN, but like something that can tell you about what is happening right now with the latest in particle research and physics research and the models that are used to understand the universe? Recommendations?
Absolutely. I'm just thinking if I know anything that is really, published like very recently. There is this the holy book of particle physics written by Griffith called Elementary Particles. Where I would not necessarily call the whole book, accessible to the general public, but at least the first 2 chapters are, in my opinion, still the 2 best chapters are explaining the history and also explaining the fundamental concepts of particle physics, which, as I said, is not sorting particles into small categories. It's the overarching principles. It's the symmetries that are really nicely covered in this book. So that's really my one go-to solution. There are a lot of, I would say, more popular science books. But to be super honest, at the moment I can only think of them in the German language, and I hate myself for that. But after all, I'm Austrian, so this is my my main language in this sense. I'm not aware of any books at the moment that are like really up to date right now. But what I like to point out is that, especially in the CERN field and the high energy physics community, there are a lot of people online on Twitter. At the moment, I think Twitter is the resource per se for anything going on in particle physics, and there are fantastic scientists at CERN who are really motivated in doing science communication. I have fantastic colleagues of mine, Claire Lee, for example, Kate Shaw.
Those.
I will definitely share some of their Twitter profiles, and just by following them, because they are very active, you get links to ongoing discussions, and also there are online forums where people can ask questions. A lot of our scientists are very active in explaining those questions because it is one of our main missions. It's a very difficult subject, so we want to do every effort it takes to make it accessible to the general public. So I think Twitter at the moment. Is a very good resource.
I'm thinking of Quora as well. If you're familiar,
that's where we are. That's where a lot of CERN scientists are active, answering questions on Quora.
The articles there, some articles especially, are very good. Like I think that I'm reading a peer-reviewed journal article, but no, it's somebody that just answered somebody else's question. So great.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. Did you have, no, this is more of a personal question. As you're growing up, you got into a path that led you to become a particle physicist. And actually, you are a teacher yourself. We should have said that at the beginning. You are a teacher. You've taught physics, philosophy. I think I saw in your profile. Let's see. There you go. You've taught at a high school. You've taught physics, philosophy, and psychology, which I found like a very interesting combination. So I wonder, like, were you influenced by somebody? It could be a teacher at school. It could be somebody that you heard about, like a scientist, or did you collected a lot of influences from a lot of different people, and they helped you along the way?
Yes, absolutely, yes. So it is true. I started as a high school physics, philosophy, and psychology teacher, and the decision for me studying to become a teacher, that was very clear during high school, because I had at least 3 or 4 just amazing teachers myself, and we all know in the daily school practice, the teacher is the most important person. It's nothing but that. It's really, if the teacher is good and if the teacher is motivated and enthusiastic, you have a long, forever lasting impact on your students. So that was the case for me as well. I had fantastic teachers who cared about us, who challenged us, and I really enjoyed that. So for me, it was clear I want to become a teacher. My love for physics was there from the very beginning, also thanks to my fantastic physics teacher. So I then started reading a lot of books from very, very good physicists. Starting with Richard Feynman and also Heisenberg himself, and all of them really had a strong, they were drawn to philosophy, because after all, the moment physics stops, philosophy starts. And so that was one of my big loves. And I was very fortunate in Austria, where I studied and I was a teacher. You have to combine 2 subjects to be a high school teacher, and I could combine physics and another subject, which in Austria is called philosophy and psychology. So I got the best out of all 3 areas, and I was really, really happy teaching all of it. But of course, it's really, this is exactly where my interests are, where physics stops, where philosophy starts. What is the things we can say about stuff that we don't even know what it is? How can we talk about particle physics when we don't even know what a particle really is? We know how to describe it, don't get me wrong, but we don't know what it is. And so that's where and I was influenced by just fantastic teachers and professors. And for me, it's very easy to define what made them fantastic. It's really, they were enthusiastic. They had a lot of knowledge that they were very happy to share with us. And I think that's all it takes.
Shows the value of the teacher, or and how undervalued are in many modern societies.
Unfortunately, yes.
Interesting what you're saying about philosophy, especially in Austria. In my PhD, I spent a lot of time reading Karl Popper, an epistemologist. It's not exactly a philosopher as most people think of them, but he's a philosopher of knowledge in particular. I spent a lot of time reading his books. Actually, have them. The only 4 books that I've got in front of me are Karl Popper's books, and they really help. Not Karl Popper in particular, but philosophy in general, really helps you think deeply about the human condition, the world. And I think it's particularly important for scientists and engineers to study philosophy, because that connects them back to being human.
So, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
I think we should put philosophy in STEM.
I fully agree.
Great. Well, Jeff, it was a real pleasure. I had so much fun talking to you. And
me too.
Constantly, Star Trek is in my mind, and 200 years from now, with all this effort and all this research and the greatest minds and the next generations coming through, I think we are going to be in the maybe Delta Quadrant. Hopefully not fighting Klingons, but exploring.
Exactly, so and making peace.
So and discovering, and it's just amazing. So thank you. It's been a really fun hour and 15 minutes for me. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much. I thank you so much for inviting me and having me. I really enjoyed it myself. Thank you.
Great. Oh, have a great day, and I hope you discover something amazing today.
If not me, I hope my teachers will.